Thank you very much. Look, it's a great honor to be here today, and we share so much in common, Ireland and India. Not least I say hello to our friends Ujjwal there in NTPC, our Deputy Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister and likely to be next Prime Minister are all, Leo Varadkar, his parents are both from India, so we share a lot of links. The fact that we're using English today speaks to our common heritage from the former colonial days, and also I suppose our escape from that and nation building, and that's where ESB came from. ESB, the origins of ESB, ironically, were in 100% renewable. We did the largest hydro project in the world in the 1920s in collaboration with Siemens from Germany, and collaboration is the theme here. It's all about collaboration. If you've learned anything from the coronavirus, it's a global problem and it needs global solutions. And now that we're getting on top of that, slowly but surely, we're back to focusing on the topic for COP26, which is being held 300 kilometers from where I'm sitting here in my home office today. We haven't been in our office since March 2020. So, the world has completely changed, but we've digitalized really quickly. So things can change, things can happen when needs and when people put their minds to it. So I think the focus is now very much and very topical. The top of the news story today was actually all about decarbonisation. This week, the Irish government will announce plans, 2 5-year plans. I don't know if we took a leaf out of the Chinese book in terms of 5-year plans, but to get us to just after 2030 to decarbonise. So I'm going to give you in 3 parts a quick whistle-stop tour of I suppose a case study from Europe. Ireland is a tiny country compared to India, but maybe so the percentages are more interesting than the absolute numbers because we're such a small country. But it might give you an idea of what's happening in Europe, because we're largely part of the European Union. We follow European policy, and we agree all the targets and work together to make a sort of a substantial contribution to global emissions reductions. So the first part is, I guess, where we've come from, the Green Ireland, how are we doing, and where we are now, what challenges are we seeing? And I'm putting on the lens of an electric power company. What are the challenges we see to achieve the next phase of the transition? And then finally, our future, looking forward, how are we going to get to zero emissions? Okay, so moving swiftly along. So part 1, the Green Ireland, as I call it. You can see there, the first wind farm was built in Ireland 30 years ago, and nothing happened for a long while afterwards because there was a huge amount of learning. It's building the wind turbines, it's getting them connected, and guess what? The wind is nowhere near where the loads are. The wind is along the Atlantic coast, largely in Ireland, and the load is on the east coast. So you've got significant transmission and distribution challenges. But you can see, if you look at the top left there, there's a little dashboard to share with you. Top left, you can see that green line. So this is generally a steady increase. It's the bars show the additions every year, and you can see 2007 local economic crash. We slowed down a bit that year. And then some other years were, largely dependent on where the subsidies were at in any given year, because, as you know, wind in the past was nowhere near grid parity. It's much closer to it now. So, but back then it was all hanging off, feed-in tariffs. But but you can see the green line is a good picture. It's common. That kind of V-shaped trend is common to all these graphs. So top left is showing the actual build-in capacity. Top right is showing the energy that we derive from that growing portfolio of wind. The kinks in the plot there in the purple are showing actually a good 2010, a bad wind year. The wind didn't blow. We're having one this year, actually, as it happens. So you can get good and bad wind years, but on average, it tends to reflect you get as much wind energy as is proportional to your installed capacity. And you can see that in the bottom left there, as a percentage of renewables in Ireland. Solar is doing nothing at the moment. Hydro along the bottom there, we did a huge hydro project and we haven't invented any more rivers yet, so not a lot else we can do there. So, the story in Ireland is all about wind. It does, close to 90% of renewable, a growing share every year, and close to 90% now. Then on the bottom right, you can see in the generation mix, we're about 40%, a little over 40% of the total generation mix in Ireland is from wind. And I can give you the latest numbers from last year. Yep, you can see that there. So Last year, 2020, we had 43.4% electricity derived from renewables in Ireland. And you can see on that chart there, 37.9, so almost 38% of that was from wind. That's the second highest percentage in the world for a national grid. The Danes, Denmark, are number one. But they use an awful lot of offshore. So actually, we are the number one in terms of onshore wind penetration in terms of renewables on a grid. That's the advantage of being a windy rock in the Atlantic, I guess. The quote there is from the Green Minister for Energy at the moment and Climate Change, Eamon Ryan. And you can see that, you know, from back in 1990, we were about 900 grams of CO2 per unit, and now we dropped that to a third, so we're below 300 grams. So that's what it's all about, decarbonizing electricity. As you know, electricity is clean at the point of consumption, so the challenge is use more electricity and make it clean, and that's how you decarbonize. This is another little dashboard for you, sort of a snapshot. So top right there, you can see this is from Saturday when I was putting these slides together. I just took a quick look at the dashboard. So we were just at 54.9% renewables at that snapshot I took. And you can see the top left there, the green line is showing wind production versus the demand. So it's tracking it nicely. And the bottom left, you'll see that's a sample year. The bars are each month wind energy production, and the green line is a sort of a 9-year rolling average. And you can see the sort of smile. So at Q1 and Q4, which are sort of our cold winter months, which is dark in the Northern Hemisphere, dark and cold and windy, that's good news because our demand actually goes up. So wind kind of it follows to a certain extent our seasonal demand patterns, and you can imagine actually we get much longer days in summer and very short days in midwinter. So actually maybe solar can fill in that gap in the middle. And on the right, bottom right, you can see we are lucky because those are load factors for wind over the years, and you can see there's a sort of a 30% or close to 30% on average load factor for wind. That makes them very financeable because we pay the same amount for wind turbines as everybody else does, and if you have more wind, it means cheaper wind energy. Now, the new challenges, they all start with a D to supposedly make it easier to remember, but I'm going to go through these very briefly because these are, you know, the do nothing option for the first time in the electricity sector is now the highest risk. It used to be the lowest risk. You just churned everybody need electricity. But because of these various factors and trends, we now need to take action. So I'm just going to very quickly whistle stop through each of them, just give you a flavor. So the first one, decarbonization. Obviously, we're aware that, you know, so the opportunity for electricity companies is, yes, build, own, and operate renewable generation assets. Lots of other people can do it as well, because you don't need to buy fuel, etc. So, but we can do it too. They can be wind, they can be solar, they can be offshore wind. Next up, demand. Actually, we've had 2 occasions where demand has dropped, both economically driven, because there's still that heavy correlation. So the post the global economic credit crunch crash 2007, we had a 5% drop in demand, and during COVID we seen an initial hit as well where we shut down factories. But actually going forward, that can be counteracted by electrifying heat and transport, and at the moment it's the only show in town in Ireland for decarbonising at any significant way, a meaningful way, heat and transport, which are basically a challenge for the government. The electricity sector itself is in the EU ETS cap and trade, so the emissions from the electricity sector are actually only 20% of the overall emissions. So even if we get 100% renewables, we're only solving 20% of the problem. But if we can electrify heat and transport, we can jump into those larger chunks. So the decoupling then is basically if your customers are you need to decouple, as it was alluded to earlier on, you know, historically economic growth increased energy demand. You know, that won't fly in future because If we don't reduce that, if we don't break that correlation, countries won't play ball because economics will drive everything. So step one is to reduce energy consumption by energy efficiency, switching to LED lighting, that kind of thing. And also, actually, it's moreover, it's about decoupling not from energy, actually from emissions. So if you can make it from a clean source, then you don't have to worry about using more energy if you're not creating more emissions. Number four then is if you're decentralizing, well, so we can look at innovative options. If maybe we are getting involved more in community wind, how do we help people? If that's the trend, we get involved with it. Number five, disintermediation. This is the value chain shrinking. I used to be a gas and power trader in the wind business. You don't need gas and power. You don't have carbon credits to trade. So it's much easier. And if it's rooftop solar, you don't have any of that either, and the ticket price is tiny. So we need to develop new services with new partners. So we're out there hunting for new partners. Utilities are not technology developers, but they have a huge customer base and very attractive to partner with technology developers. So in terms of democratization, if everybody's got their own, well, we need to reduce, if we're selling a commodity into a market where people are making their own, maybe we need to reduce that reliance. So actually we also sell natural gas. We've done that for a while, but we're also selling gigabit fiber to the home. So we're putting fiber along our networks and bringing it right down to people's homes so they can get future-proofed. And if more people are working from home nowadays in COVID world, and that trend is sticky. And when we go back, we're not going backwards. So people will be working, part from home, part from the office, and real estate prices are cheaper outside the cities. So more and more people are looking for high performance broadband. So we are already in that. We've done a joint venture with Vodafone called Cyro to bring that product to market again. And it links to number 7 as well. So redevelop and reuse assets. So if our assets, the demand for our product is changing, we need to change the product to meet the demand. And if there's increased demand for digital products, data, well, one of that, we've actually got a planning permission for a data center at one of our thermal sites, which will not be used, obviously, for thermal plant going forward. Number 8 then, if disruptive technologies are coming fast and furious, we need to accelerate our own innovation. If you're not innovating as quick as the market, you're falling behind, and eventually you'll become a sunset industry. So number 9, digitalization is happening. Nobody would have believed that we could have done within 3 weeks. Last March of 2020, we went from 20% remote working to 80% remote working in ESB. So where there's a will and a need, there's a way. So we know we can do it. And that feeds across the business. My colleague Ratna Nilapati, an Indian national on this call, she's developing a solution with a startup called Sudici, where we can use the meter number as a unique identifier of your address. So digital authentication, which is an increasing requirement for digital online transactions, secure transactions. So again, more innovation. And finally, number 10, if utility model 1.0 is dead, the Germans tell us it's already dead in Germany, we need to have utility 2.0 ready, and we are working on that. So in terms of part 3, the final part, our future. So if you look at Ireland there, yeah, we're way up in the northwest of Europe. The little red line on the center top picture shows you the territorial waters of Ireland. So we have actually 10 times more territorial waters than we do landmass. And if you look at top right, you'll notice the dark red, that's showing the wind resource. So the best wind resource in Europe are right along our coastline. It's very deep water, so fixing offshore to the seabed is not an option. So it's floating offshore or nothing for that part of the world. So if you look at the bottom left, that's an actual photograph of the last coal plant in Ireland, Money Point. We are going to reconvert that. Our vision for the future, in these 2 images to the right, we call it the Green Atlantic Project, is to use that. It's a deep sea water base on the west coast of Ireland, but electrically it's connected to the largest demand centers across the country by high voltage power lines. So it's a great asset to have. So reusing those assets there, we're going to reuse that deep sea port as an assembly point for offshore floating wind and a service point for offshore floating wind. And the building on the right is a computer rendition of the green hydrogen production facility. So any excess wind, and there will be lots of it, we'll convert to green hydrogen and use it as a clean fuel. So next up then is really, this is live. This is going to be broadcast later on today in Ireland. The committee that's responsible is going to explain how we're going to hit these targets, but essentially the leaks to date are, the ambition is to reduce our emissions by 51% by 2030, net carbon neutral by 2050, very aggressive targets. And to do that, we're going to have 80% of electricity from renewables. Solar hasn't happened yet, so all that solar is going to be new, and we're going to go for offshore in a big way, and more onshore wind as well. And on the demand side, three things are going to happen. We're going to have far more electric vehicles and heat pumps in our homes, and we're also going to, the government is going to co-fund upgrades to improve the energy efficiency of people's homes. And the idea is to decarbonize transport and heating, and use actually those flexible loads to take the excess wind as well. So in a nutshell, to summarize, we're going to have to lower our emissions, reduce our cost to serve, and have lower outage levels. And across the bottom, you can see how we're going to do that. Increase up the energy efficiency dial, build far more. We've only one offshore wind farm at the moment. We're going to have far more offshore wind, and solar is going to arrive in Ireland. So opportunities for people who want to get involved in Ireland. And we're going to electrify heat and transport. And all of that needs to be managed in a new way with big data, machine learning and AI to make it all hang together, because it's kind of fly-by-wire equivalent now that we're moving to a non-synchronous grid. And finally, we don't have the answers. We know we don't have all the answers, and no single country does. So we're reaching out, and which I'll refer to it earlier on, as we developed a program which is being analyzed by Stanford University because it seems to be working really well. But we're collaborating. That top right QR code, if you flick on it with your smart camera, it'll bring you to a link, and you're welcome to join us. But basically, we've 9 utilities from around the world working together, and to bring to find the best tech companies every year. We've had tech companies from India participate. This year we had 780 companies, from 76 countries around the world participating in the program, entering, and we whittled that down to the best. And then we do pilots with them. And on the 10th of November, final slide, you can see we've run this multi-module program, started in Dubai in May, Melbourne, Lisbon, Hong Kong, and the final module is in Dublin on the 10th of November. And we have an innovation open day where you'll get far more in-depth briefing from the CEO of ESB, CEO of E.ON, the head of startups from the government program in Ireland. The CEO of Enterprise Ireland will give a keynote address. So, if you want to learn a little bit more about what we're doing as a sort of a case study in Europe to achieve the goals of the energy transition, it's open collaboration. We're happy to learn from India, and we're happy to share our learnings. So this is an open invitation for people at the conference. The QR code is there. Grab your smart camera, click on it, and you can register in 2 seconds and join us on the 10th of November. Look, it's a great pleasure to be with you today. It's an honor, and thank you kindly to Chemtech and to NTPC for inviting ESB to present. And we wish you a very successful conference. And please feel free to contact us if you think we can collaborate in Ireland or in India or any other part of the world, because it's a global problem and it needs global solutions. Thank you very much.